The movie begins showing various scenes of a Saturday morning at Jess's house, who works as a waitress in Miami. She raises her son Tommy alone, and the boy has autism. At the beginning, we see Tommy crying, as if something had made him sad. Jess calms him down, saying it was just a bad dream. Later, Jess is retrieving Tommy's expensive toy from the swimming pool while he paints a book in the kitchen. Shortly after, Jess is cleaning paint off the kitchen floor. She ends up staining her floral dress, which makes her very angry. At that moment, someone rings the doorbell, but when she goes to check, there's no one outside. The scene changes again, and Jess, now wearing a white blouse and denim shorts, hastily puts her clothes in a large suitcase. She takes the house keys and is about to leave when she sees a note on the refrigerator. It's a reminder to meet her friend Greg at the Florida port at 8:30 in the morning that same day. Later, Jess loads the suitcase into the car with difficulty, as if there was something very heavy inside. She and Tommy go to the Florida port, where a private boat called the Triangle is waiting for them. Greg, the boat owner, organized a sea trip for some friends, including Jess. The first people to arrive are Sally, her husband Downey, and their friend Heather. Shortly after, Victor arrives, who helps Greg on the boat, followed by Jess, looking very tired. The strange thing is that Tommy is nowhere to be found. Greg runs to Jess with a big smile and asks if she's okay. But before he can ask more, she hugs him and apologizes. Greg is confused and says they can cancel the trip if she doesn't want to go, but Jess insists on making the journey. So they set out to sea with a bright blue sky. Hey, what would you do if you were stuck in a loop? The film I'm summarizing is called Triangle. This is a very good film that mixes fantasy, mystery, fiction, and suspense. I remember the first time I watched it as a teenager, my sister and I kept coming up with various theories about the ending. This is a film that, if you don't pay attention from beginning to end, you finish without understanding anything. That's why I invite you to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave a like to receive the best recaps. After a while, Jess, who is very tired, falls asleep in the cabin. She dreams that she's being taken to a beach. But soon, Heather arrives in the cabin and wakes her up. While the two have a glass of sparkling wine, Jess seems a bit lost, as if she doesn't quite remember what happened before falling asleep. Shortly after, Heather and Jess join the others on the deck, where Victor warns that the wind has completely stopped. Downey then sees a storm approaching, and dark, frightening clouds take the place of the blue sky. Worried, Greg uses the radio to talk to the Coast Guard and explain their situation. But the conversation between the Triangle and the Coast Guard is interrupted by another call from a nearby ship. Greg hears a woman's voice screaming that everyone on her boat is dead. Concerned, Greg asks her to say where she is, but the conversation is cut off when the storm hits their boat. Victor and Greg rush to the deck, trying to avoid problems, while the others gather in the cabin wearing life jackets. The boat ends up capsizing and Heather drowns in the water. Suddenly, the strange storm passes as quickly as it arrived. The blue sky returns, and the 5 people who survived sit on top of the overturned boat. But they don't stay stranded for long, because a large ship called Aeolus appears. Downey, relieved, sees someone on the deck of the ship and waves excitedly. Soon the ship comes close enough for them to climb aboard. As the 5 walk through the empty corridors, it seems that there is no one on the ship. Meanwhile, Jess has a strange feeling, as if she had seen these corridors before. Downey draws their attention to an old photograph on the corridor wall. It says that the ship, Aeolus, was built in 1932 and explains the Greek story behind the name. Aeolus is the father of Sisyphus, a man who was condemned by the gods to push a stone uphill forever. Suddenly, they hear a loud noise as if something had fallen to the floor. Victor goes to see what it is and finds a keychain with 2 keys and a photo of a boy. To Jess's surprise, she recognizes that the keychain is hers, and the photo is of her son. This confuses her, and she swears she had the keys when she entered Greg's boat. Sally thinks it might be Heather who entered the boat with the keys without them seeing. Later, the 5 find a banquet hall with food arranged, as if everything was ready for a party. As they look around, Jess sees someone's reflection in the mirror and warns the others. Victor immediately goes to look for this mysterious person. Shortly after, Greg and Jess leave to look for the captain of the ship, asking Sally and Downey to wait in the banquet hall for Victor. In the next scene, Jess and Greg are walking down the empty corridor when they hear the sound of water coming from room 237. In the room's mirror, they find a message written in blood: "Go to the theater." Greg thinks it's just a prank by the ship's crew who have nothing to do, but Jess is quite frightened. Because of this, they argue a little and she decides to return to the banquet hall while Greg heads towards the theater. When Jess arrives at the banquet hall, she's surprised that Downey and Sally aren't there. Shortly after, Victor arrives all bloody and tries to strangle her, but she sees a nasty cut on his head and presses until Victor passes out from pain. Before she can breathe a sigh of relief, the sound of a gunshot makes her run to the theater, where she finds Greg with a large bullet wound in his stomach. To her horror, Sally and Downey are also there and accuse her of having done this. They say that before dying, Greg told them that she was the one who shot him. Downey also asks Jess why she asked them to go to the theater. Confused, she says she hasn't met with them since she and Greg left the banquet hall. At that moment, someone mysterious with a mask starts shooting at them from the upper floor of the theater. Sally and Downey die instantly while Jess escapes. The masked person chases after her, and after a quick chase, the two meet in the middle of the ship. Jess takes an emergency axe hanging on the ship's wall, and surprisingly, wins the fight. With no bullets in the gun, the masked person says softly, "It's the only way to get back home," and then repeats, "Kill them." But Jess ignores these words and delivers a strong blow with the axe, causing the person to fall from the ship. Now everyone on the ship is dead, leaving Jess as the only survivor of this crazy thing. But Jess doesn't have much time to think about what happened, because she hears various voices shouting from the sea. In a shocking twist, Jess sees 5 people trapped on an overturned boat near the ship. These 5 people are none other than Greg, Victor, Sally Downey, and herself. The new Downey sees someone on the deck and waves, not knowing it's her. The new group then boards the ship, and everything happens exactly as it happened before. The Jess who survived spies on the Jess who just arrived, who feels as if she had already lived that. Later in the corridor, the Jess who survived accidentally drops her keychain and flees before anyone sees her. Just as happened before, Victor finds the keychain with Tommy's photo. In the next scene, the surviving Jess goes to the banquet hall and hides behind a column. Again, the group arrives there, and the new Jess sees her in the mirror. Frightened, she flees, but the new Victor finds her on the deck. The surviving Jess tells him that there's a copy of her downstairs in the banquet hall and that they'll all die. Victor, somewhat confused, doesn't quite believe it, even when Jess shows him a body floating in the water. But when she throws an apple, the body had disappeared. While the two are talking, the conversation gets tense. Victor walks backward towards the deck wall, and Jess accidentally pushes him, making him hit his head on 2 sharp pins. The impact makes a fatal cut on his head. This scares the surviving Jess, so she runs to the ship's engine room. There, well hidden in a closet, she finds the crew uniform that the masked person was wearing. Nearby, she also finds several shotguns with ammunition. At this point, she realizes that the things that happened before are repeating. So, there's going to be someone who will shoot at the new Sally and the new Downey in the theater. The surviving Jess then takes the shotgun, goes to the banquet hall, and hides behind a column, just in time when the new Jess finds the bleeding Victor. But what happens next didn't happen the other time. The surviving Jess meets the other version of herself, makes her run away frightened, and because of this, prevents her from accidentally killing Victor. But Victor seems to have lost a lot of blood and dies on the banquet hall floor. When the surviving Jess arrives at the theater, Greg is already dead, but Sally and Downey are still alive. The masked person also appears in the balcony, and the surviving Jess shoots at them. The bullet almost hits the masked person's head, but makes a wound that starts to bleed. Taking the chance, Sally, Downey, and the surviving Jess flee from the theater to an empty corridor. She then gives the gun to Downey and runs to the banquet hall where the new Victor had passed out moments before. But his body isn't there, and the blood trail on the floor shows that he was dragged out and thrown into the sea. Meanwhile, Downey sees someone coming towards them from the other side of the corridor and fires a few times to warn. Without his knowledge, the person who is coming is the masked person, who now hides behind a wall. In a shocking twist, the masked person removes the mask, revealing that it's another version of Jess. At this moment, there are 3 versions of Jess on the ship: the surviving Jess, the new Jess, and this killer Jess. After removing the mask, the killer Jess convinces the husband and wife to follow her. She takes them to room 237, where she cuts Downey's throat with a knife and stabs Sally in the stomach. Sally, wounded, manages to escape from the room, and while fleeing from the killer, she reaches the radio room. She picks up the microphone and sends a desperate message asking for help. This message goes directly to another version of Greg, whose boat has not yet been overturned by the storm. But before Sally can send the complete message, she hears footsteps behind her and runs to the upper deck. To her horror, there are several bodies of herself lying lifeless on the deck, with seagulls pecking at the corpses. The surviving Jess soon arrives on the deck, and despite the shock of seeing the bodies, she comforts the dying Sally. She also sees the fight between the new Jess and the unmasked killer Jess. Just like before, the killer is thrown off the ship. Almost at the same time, another group of 5 trapped people arrives near the ship, and a new cycle begins. Now it's obvious to the original Jess that the Aeolus ship is stuck in a time loop. The 5 trapped people arrive from the overturned boat, then are killed one by one, only for things to start again. Now the surviving Jess, also known as the original Jess, is destined to become the masked killer. She knows that the loop will continue happening until she can prevent the 5 people trapped on the overturned boat from boarding the Aeolus. For this to happen, she will have to kill everyone on the ship now, including the newer version of herself. Following this, the original Jess goes to room 237, where she finds Downey's body. She drags him to the deck and throws him into the sea. Then, using his blood, she writes, "Go to the theater" on the mirror in room 237. Next, she goes to the newer version of Downey and Sally and tells them to go to the theater. She then goes to the engine room, puts on the crew uniform, puts on a mask with 2 holes for the eyes, and loads a shotgun. The original Jess has now become the killer Jess. She goes to the upper floor of the theater and points her gun at the new Greg, who recognizes her by looking at her slippers. Before he can understand what's happening, the original Jess shoots him, then Sally and Downey. The new version of Jess escapes. Just as happened during the first time loop, things then repeat, with the masked Jess fighting against the newer version of Jess on the deck outside. And just like in the first loop, the Jess who had just arrived on the ship wins. The original Jess, still behind the mask, runs out of bullets and says softly, "It's the only way to save our son. You have to kill them," before falling into the sea. But she doesn't die, because she's carried by the water to the beach and finds her way back home. There, she sees another Jess in her house, who hasn't gone to the boat yet. As she observes herself, hidden near a bush, the scenes from the beginning of the film are repeated, but with more details. It turns out that Jess had been a terrible mother to Tommy. She yells at the boy for leaving the expensive boat toy in the pool and curses at him all the time. The original Jess feels guilty for the things she did and peeks through the window. Inside the house, Tommy is painting in the kitchen and suddenly sees her looking. He gets scared and spills the paint on the floor. Soon after, the angry Jess comes to the kitchen and gets furious when she sees the mess. She hits the boy and sends him to his room. She then starts cleaning the paint that also stained her floral dress. Seeing all this, the original Jess quickly makes a plan. She takes a hammer from the yard, rings the doorbell, and with her angry version distracted, she enters the house. When the angry Jess returns, she kills her using the hammer. Unfortunately, Tommy sees everything happen from afar. This makes him cry, so the original Jess consoles him, saying it was just a bad nightmare. After this, she puts her clothes and the body in a large suitcase. The original Jess then puts the suitcase in the trunk and gets into the car with Tommy. While driving to the port, a seagull hits the front window of the car, leaving a splash of blood on it. The original Jess stops the car, picks up the dead bird, and goes to throw it on the beach. To her horror, she sees a bunch of dead seagulls thrown in the same place. This means she's still trapped in a loop. Disturbed by this, she starts driving again, but Tommy screams when he sees the blood on the glass. While the original Jess is a bit distracted by the screams, the car deviates slightly and is hit by a truck coming from the other side. The car is thrown into the air and lands several meters away in the middle of the road. People around rush to the scene, and when the camera rises, the dead bodies of Jess and Tommy are on the ground. but the dead Jess is wearing a floral dress with paint stains, showing that it's the version that was killed by the hammer. The original Jess, who is wearing a white blouse and denim shorts, miraculously wasn't hurt, but seems shaken by the accident. No one notices her, except a local taxi driver. He tells her that there's nothing she can do to save Tommy, and that she should move on after this horrible scene. Unwittingly, the original Jess asks him to take her to the Florida port. In the final scene, the taxi arrives at the destination, and Jess leaves without paying. There, she sees Victor, who asks about Tommy. Clearly shaken by the car accident, she lies to him and says that Tommy is at school. She then goes to Greg, hugs him, and joins the others on the boat that's about to leave. The cycle continues, and the screen goes black. And so the movie ends. Did you understand the film? Write your theory in the comments, and don't forget to comment the rating you give to this film. So that's it. Until the next recap.